the Liverpool results. So Liverpool 2, Arsenal 2 at Anfield. And, given how there was so much disappointment after midweek going to Anfield, I think a lot of Gooners thought, this is not going to be a good day out for us, especially when you saw the team sheets. There was no Declan Rice finishing the game with 10 men as well. But to come back in the way that they did from 2 goals down, were there more positives than negatives for that one for you?
I don't know if there were more positives than negatives, but they deserve an awful lot of credit for what they did in the second half, no doubt about it. I mean, they looked absolutely out on their feet. The sort of 20-25 minute period in the first half when they conceded those goals and then could easily have gone 3-4 down was really, really poor, as you could tell by Mikel Arteta's reaction afterwards. But the second half, I do think they deserve an awful lot of credit because they the week they'd had mentally, physically, emotionally, everything like that, to then go to the champions, to be 2-0 down at half time, the guard of honor stuff, everything, their heads must have been absolutely spinning. And like you said about Declan Rice as well, he's basically been carrying the team for the last couple of months. To come back the way they did, to show the sort of character they did and the fight that they did, I think it really impressed me. I have to say, I was absolutely not expecting it. At half time, all I was thinking was don't lose 4 or 5 or 6-0, which kind of looked like was a real possibility of happening the way Arsenal had played. So to come away from drawing and almost could have won, if Odegaard's shot sneaks in at the end, they walk over 3-2 win. That's an unbelievable result. So yeah, I think they deserve an awful lot of credit for what they did in that second half.
They did, yeah. I mean, even though Odegaard's shot didn't go in, it was nice to see him actually pull the trigger more often
Mm.
than he has been doing in recent weeks, especially for that Marino equaliser. But the fact that, Liverpool were really running Arsenal riot in that first half, then the second half they just didn't wake up, it seemed. And then Arsenal were on top of them. So I mean, for you, how did Arsenal have such a big shift from the first half to the second half? Was it just a case of Liverpool not switching on in the second half, Arsenal not switching on in the first half? What were the key differences for you?
Uh, well, I think obviously Arteta tweaked things at half time, and you could clearly see by his reaction at post match that he'd obviously absolutely hammered him in the dressing room when they got in there. He was absolutely furious with what he'd seen in that first half, and so he'd obviously got into them, and I'm sure absolutely tore strips into them, and he obviously tweaked things a little bit. We saw Gabriel Martinelli and Trossard sort of switch over. Suddenly, you had Martinelli getting behind Canate and Van Dijk and causing them problems. Ben White really pushed forward on the right hand side as well. He kind of played like Timber did in the first half against PSG, and suddenly just swung the momentum. And straight away from the start, Arsenal were on it, and Liverpool weren't. I think Liverpool were probably a little bit surprised. They thought it was done and dusted at half time, and at any level, it's pretty hard to sort of flick that switch back on again if you've turned it off a little bit, and suddenly the momentum in the game's gone. And so I think there was a few things that sort of combined to allow it to happen. I also think that the first half, Arsenal actually started the game okay for 10 minutes, but then they just midfield and defence. It was so, and that's why Arteta was so angry afterwards because it was really unlike Arsenal. The gaps between the midfield and the defenders, there was no sort of defensive line with the four there all over the place. Everyone was sort of switched off and half asleep, and you can't do that at Anfield. You've got to be bang on it at Anfield. If not, you're gonna, game's gonna go away from you like that, and it very nearly did. So I think there was lots of factors in play in the first half and lots of factors in play in the second half. It was just a really strange game, I thought, at the end to really sort of sum up how it went.
Yeah, proper game of two halves, wasn't
Yeah.
it? The old cliche. And what you were saying there, like you said, Arteta was furious after the game, saying that he hates reaction, he likes action. And in the past 2 seasons, where Arsenal have pushed Man City close, there's been a lot of reaction. I think back to the comebacks against like Luton, Bournemouth, Southampton, and he now wants to see Arsenal actually, make this, proper fast start as opposed to like we saw coming back from 2 goals down. So does that, show or enhance how he's had this shift in mentality or his philosophy from the chaos of the last 2 seasons to the he wants more control in this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's glaringly obvious how Arsenal has tried to sort of shift away from that chaos that we sort of loved for that first surprise season when none of us were expecting a title charge, and then it was just that chaotic, vibrant young team that we saw emerge, and it was really fun to watch. But it was, I'm sure for a manager it was pretty tough to watch at times on the touchline. And we've seen Arteta move away from that. He is much more about control now. I thought he was really interesting after the game. Given the week Arsenal had going out the way they did, the travel, everything like that, to then go to the champions. they could have been excused a little bit. You could have been given a bit of a pass for not playing that well and struggling. And more often than not, Arteta will give him a pass, especially publicly. Probably behind the scenes he doesn't, but publicly he will. So to come out the way he did after them coming back and getting a draw, fighting back, you'd have expected him to be like, oh, fair, great for the players. They deserve a lot of credit, kind of like what I've said. But he went really down a different route, a route I wasn't expecting. I kind of liked it, to be honest, because it really was a sort of, this is not, if we want to be this team, if we want to be Liverpool, if we want to be the team celebrating the title, we cannot play like we did in the first half, no matter what the context. And, we know he's got high standards and he wants his players to adhere to them. But I was surprised he went down that route. But like I said, I was actually quite pleased on it. And I think this is kind of where next season starts now. And I thought that post-match stuff was about next season more than anything else. Like if we want to be where we want to be, we can't play like that. We just cannot do it. And he was very, very, yeah, very open. I think he's really been emotional the last week. I think the Champions League has hurt him a lot. He knew that Arsenal could have won it this season. He knew they were really, really close if things had just gone their way against PSG. And I think he's been really frustrated. And we've seen that in him in all of his interviews he's done since that game, including after full time on Sunday.
Yeah, just going back to that Champions League game, because after PSG, he said that comment of how the PSG bench told him that Arsenal were, the best team in Europe this season. That's been in the headlines so much. He's been lambasted for saying that, basically. And do you think, the reaction, maybe he doesn't really look at the reaction to that, but do you think it might have affected him and been a factor in why he really laid into his players post-match at the weekend?
I don't know because he doubled down on those comments in the press conference on Friday before the match. And it wasn't that he was saying he didn't say Arsenal were the best team in Europe. He said that Arsenal were he thought the sort of the numbers backed up that they were the best team in the champion or had been the best team in the Champions League this season. He got sort of pulled apart as always the kind of comments that he said. And the fact he doubled down on them as Friday, I was surprised. I thought he might have said, "Look, I was a bit emotional after the game and all that sort of stuff," but he didn't. He was very much, "No, I fully back what I said." So, I don't know if that sort of played into what he said on Sunday. I just think Sunday was. I just think he was really disappointed with that first half performance, and he just thought this is the time now to really send a message to the players for next season that if we want to win the trophies that we want to win, we can't afford to play like that. And I just think he thought the time was right to really make that very clear.